All right. I think we are just about ready to get started here. So Trump just got off the plane, as did Putin. I just watched that happen live. So we're just kind of waiting to see they're having their meeting right now. We got a couple different news stations here that we're waiting on. So basically, this is what we're going to be looking at today here. Let's see, where is Ukraine? All right. There's my kickbot, my obligatory kickbot to start the stream. Let me just clear that out real quick. All right, so I've been kind of waiting for this to happen. You can only talk about what might happen so much before it actually does happen. So I kind of held off on doing another War Tracker stream this week because of that. It just made a lot of sense to wait and try and do this live. And don't really know how long this meeting's going to take these two. It could take them all freaking day for all we know. So we'll be hanging out at least a couple hours waiting for these guys to. Oh, look at that. Well, we have a feed, but it looks like this is Reuters. I don't know if it's actually working. Certainly doesn't seem to be. Now we can kind of click around and
remarkable
get
happened.
one
The
of
two
these.
presidents.
The margins and a commitment probably to resume.
So we want the live press conference,
which is to say,
there we go.
Vladimir Putin trying to argue for other ways in relations with Russia.
All right. So obviously, this has been going on for about 3.5 years now. This war, it's by far the biggest war Europe's seen since World War II. So I think collectively the world wants this to end. It's a matter of getting Putin to stop. The thing about Putin is he feels, I think him and a lot of other Russians kind of feel entitled to these regions of Ukraine. It's in some ways it seems like they're kind of restoring some USSR glory, while on the other hand, it seems like maybe they just feel like that is actually Russia, as we refer to it as. So that was kind of the precipice, I guess, for this war to begin with, was the reclaiming territory, so to speak, from the viewpoint of the Russians.
A lot of analysts talk about that. Does that come up in your interviews with people who are engaged in actually trying to make this peace happen?
Those things are certainly leverage for the president if he wanted to use that leverage. And that's the thing that makes this so different from all the diplomatic summits that I have ever.
Let's go back here.
Because President Trump's own convictions on this issue have changed.
Certainly President Trump doesn't take the opportunity to speak.
Putin's kind of short, eh? Oh, we got our fighter jets out there.
I hate to say it, but more importantly, what do the people of Ukraine make of it all, do you think?
What are those, 35s?
Yeah, well, Mark,
I think they're 35s.
What Ukrainians are making of these extraordinary scenes from Anchorage, what they're saying on social media. Our teams here have been monitoring.
This is what Ukrainians are saying.
Azad Safarov, our Ukrainian producer, has been monitoring his Facebook page. He says on his page alone there are hundreds of people commenting about this. They are disgusted, and people are
disgusted.
Really angry. One comment from one of them: "It's disgusting seeing Trump greeting Putin in a friendly way with a red carpet. Putin occupies territories. He destroys entire cities. He kills, rapes, robs, kidnaps, tortures, and as a result receives a red carpet welcome." I wonder what
they're not wrong.
Military thinks, says another Ukrainian, when their commander-in-chief shakes the sweaty hand of a murderer. The first questions from journalist: Putin, do you agree to a ceasefire? Did you underestimate Ukraine? Are you ready to stop killing civilians? That was something we heard shortly after these pictures were taken when Putin and Trump walked down the red carpet and are throwing questions by journalists. And as this Ukrainian comments and notes on Facebook, Putin just smiled in response and waved his small sweaty hand. That is geopolitics for you, says that Ukrainian rather philosophical.
Does Putin speak English? He's got to speak English, right?
Kind of
Let's look this up real quick.
Nauseated by these scenes. I mean, the thing is, Mark, there are ways of welcoming world leaders for historic summits. And there are
He's also fluent in German and has some level of English proficiency.
You know, Donald Trump could have done this in a way where he could have been seen to be metaphorically holding his
Typically
hands.
relies on a translator.
But instead, he has, as we've been saying, been rolling out the red carpet. He has given Vladimir Putin full honours in this welcome, complete with a military fly past above, and then welcoming the Russian president into the back of Cadillac One, where we saw Putin sniggering. I think we can assume pretty much on purpose, for the cameras laughing in the back of Cadillac.
Yeah, I mean, they're not wrong. Why would Putin not be enamored with this visit?
Clear message, not just to them, but also to Ukraine's European allies. A clear message that this is how Donald Trump sees where his sympathies lie, and that has been made pretty clear throughout his presidency. His diplomats have voted for the Russians on the Russian side in the UN. He has, at many turns in this conflict, given the Russian leader the benefits of the doubt, and he has let Vladimir Putin wriggle off the hook. Most recently, when he seemed poised on the brink of imposing much more severe sanctions on the Russians, he took.
Yeah, that was last Friday. We were waiting to see if there was going to be any announcement, what was going to happen. There's them shaking hands.
In Alaska instead. So I think, you know, there'll be, I think, deep concern amongst Ukrainians that the pictures they're seeing here, Mark, today, and I think they will say to their European allies, this is a very clear message. And I think we have to remember, Donald Trump is somebody who understands the power of television pictures more than many others, probably more than anyone else of his generation in politics. This is a scene that he would have thought through with his advisors, will be very happy about, and it is clearly broadcasting a certain picture to the world that he will be aware of. It's not accidental. Quite why he's doing this is not yet clear, but it is sending a clear message to the world, a message that is appalling, as I say, and nauseating Ukrainians watching on television.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't blame Ukrainians for not being too happy about this. I mean, first of all, Zelensky was shut out. He was not invited.
The building, and there is no sound on these pictures. We await that, if indeed there was any. As I say, it may well be that that the Russians didn't want that to happen. James Matthews is at the airbase with the American delegation. And James, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Donald Trump would normally seize the opportunity and would, you know, hold court for what? Well, you see it day in, day out. Hold court for an hour, 2 hours.
Yeah, he would very much be the man in charge of an occasion like this, Mark. I think Dominic made a very good point, Mark. You know, this business of the presentation of today. Donald Trump is a man, you know, he's showbiz. You know, remember.
It's definitely been dolled up a lot. That's for sure. I mean, you kind of expected that. Trump's going to do those visual types things. See, we were on Sky News. Oh, do we have sound in here?
Just go up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, press. 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 Let's go. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, press.
Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Telling them to get the fuck out. Well, there you go. That's over with. So they let him sit down, get some pictures for a few seconds, and then I think they kicked everyone out so they could have their conversation. It would seem. So now we're going to wait for them to talk for a while. This might take some time. It might not. Trump has stated, as you would kind of expect him to state something like this, but he said that he'll know pretty quickly what Putin's intentions are, just reading his body language and everything. Something you would expect Trump to say, but he also said he has basically a 75% chance of succeeding here. Now, the problem with that is President Zelensky from Ukraine has said that he's not going to honor anything that's negotiated here. So, this might all just be a big dog and pony show for all we know. But apparently they're probably starting their conversations right now.
President Zelensky tries to play his hand very, very bad hand.
This is Al Jazeera.
I think felt happier under the Biden administration because the Biden administration was supplying him with the weapons that he wanted and the money that he wanted. He's now come to a sort of understanding with the US that the weapons can come Ukraine's way if they are paid for, and they're going to be paid for by other NATO countries and other EU countries. They're no longer going to be gifted by the United States. But as I said, in addition to the diplomacy and the politics, there is the military situation on the ground, and it's not going Ukraine's way. I don't think we're looking at a collapse of the Ukrainian military, but if you just look at the territory on the ground and you look at over recent months, over the last more than a year, every month a little bit gets taken by Russia. They do have the upper hand. They have the momentum. There was in recent hours, in the last 48 hours or so, there was a little bit of a Russian breakthrough, not a major one, but I think it's an indication that Ukraine is particularly tired. I think the Russian military is also tired. But remember how many people...
And you know what he's saying right there about the Russians have finally been able to start making advances over the last 6 months or so, especially this year. It makes you wonder if Putin, why, when things are starting to go their way, why would they take their foot off the gas now? Especially, it would look very odd on Putin to stop suddenly. When he's convinced, more or less convinced, at least tried to convince his country that this is a noble cause, this war in Ukraine. I just don't see him stopping just because Donald Trump says so. And then with Zelensky saying they'll never give up any land, I don't know how this is going to wind down anytime soon. See what these guys have to say.
That we've got confirmation that the president of Russia will be flanked by his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov and his presidential aide Yuri Ushakov. These are three men who have a dearth of experience. We have a lot of experience, rather, with them. President Vladimir Putin, president for more than 25 years, and Sergei Lavrov, perhaps the longest-serving foreign minister with more than 2 decades of experience, sitting down across President Trump. And let's remind our viewers of the lead-up to all of this. Just a week ago, President Trump had ordered that he is going to reposition his nuclear submarines towards Russia. The day after, Steve Witkoff arrived in Moscow and had those important conversations with the Russian delegation and the Russian president, giving him the message that the US president is really ready to deal with him. And from then, where we heard it's going to be a trilateral meeting to a bilateral meeting to a one-on-one meeting, and now this 3-member delegation by each side are now meeting. We're hearing from the Russian side that this is something that could last for hours and hours. Some even say that it could be up to 6 to 7 hours. But let's see what is the mood. So far, what we've seen with the body language of the two men who know each other is that they greeted each other warmly. They've sat down with each other, and we're going to wait to see what actually comes out of it. From the Russian perspective, there's a lot that is at stake, and it is already being portrayed as a win for Vladimir Putin. He's been able to separate the U.S. from the European partners and the Ukrainians, and having a one-on-one meeting. You've got the president of Russia.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. I mean, the fact that he's been invited to the United States to come talk about his war that he's currently winning, I mean, it does nothing but prove validity in some ways. But I mean, we're gonna see. We'll see what the end result of this meeting is.
This is all being seen here, that this has a multi-level, multifaceted messaging that is being conveyed. On the one hand, you've got the President of the United States saying that he wants a deal and he won't be happy if there is a deal. And this is right after he said that he's not going to be talking about the issue of borders and areas and ground control, because that is what is a red line for Vladimir Putin, who's made it very clear in the last few months that what he wants is to control all of that territory of Russian-speaking citizens who he's taken over and annexed. He wants the Ukrainians to completely give up their ambitions. Again, a red line for Volodymyr Zelensky. And what the Ukrainians need to do is assure Russia that they will not be used as a staging point by the rest of the world, because Russia sees that if Ukraine joins NATO and the European Union, it will be them sharing a border with Russia, to something that for Russia is not acceptable. And you also have to remember that while all of this diplomacy is happening, the situation on the ground remains really tense. We're hearing from the Ministry of Defense that they said more than 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers they claim they have killed in the last week alone. There have been hundreds of drone strikes in the last few days. The Ukrainians have been targeting oil and gas facilities. The Russians have been trying to make more ingress, take more areas, and this territorial control is going to be key forward for either peace or a trilateral meeting with Zelensky, which Putin has not ruled out, but he says that a lot of groundwork needs to be done before that can be achieved.
Simon, give us a sense of what the feeling is on the ground there in the Russian capital and how the people are viewing this.
Well, we have seen, we've been meeting a number of people. We've met academics, we've met former soldiers, and we've met people in the street. And the mood is that although people are skeptical of what can actually come out of it, there is jubilance that there might be something, especially from the military perspective, that people might be able to come back from the trenches. But by and large, people are hopeful that there could be a move towards peace, because there are a lot of restrictions on Russia. Even today, there are internet restrictions in Russia. The economy has faltered, although it's not fallen after all of those sanctions, but people have been feeling the pinch. They have not been able to travel as freely as where they wanted to. There are international carriers who do not come to Russia anymore. Although many of those gaps have been filled by Russia's friends and allies, which we saw Vladimir Putin reach out to in the last few days. But there's still lots of gaps that remain, and people are tired of a war, and everyone who we've spoken to actually wants peace, but at the cost, the price of peace should be which favors Russia rather than the Ukrainians or the.
So that's pretty interesting. This guy, he's on the ground in Moscow, and he's saying a lot of Russians want this war to end as well. Part of it's, the economy hasn't been doing too well in Russia because a lot of those sanctions and stuff. And then I think part of it has to do with, family members serving on the fronts. The Russian military has lost either killed or wounded an estimated over 1 million people now. Oh, thank you for the follow on Twitter. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear that perspective from the average Russian citizen there.
Ceasefire. Well, August 8th came and went, and now here we are, August 15th, and if to perhaps show that Vladimir Putin did not respect the U.S. deadline announced by the U.S. president, suddenly we have this summit that's going to occur instead. And so it's a little bit of optics, if you will, the fact that the U.S. president has the fact that that deadline came and really was meaningless in terms of the wording. So now for the U.S. president to say if he doesn't get peace, there will be severe consequences, it's really come into question what that could look like and what that could mean. And in terms of the optics, I think it's important to discuss those arrival pictures that we had of the two leaders. As we've talked about here in Al Jazeera extensively, Donald Trump is a showman. He's very good at manipulating the media, and he's very good at putting on a show. And that's really what we saw, is we saw the red carpets that were laid out, which of course is symbolic, something you do for someone you like, but also flanking those red carpets were 4 Raptors, F-22 aircraft.
All right, there are
Flying
22s, not
overhead
35s.
Were 2 bombers. Why are those significant? Those are significant because those are important aircrafts to Donald Trump and showed what he believes is a position of strength. They were used, the same types of aircraft were used for those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities in order to try and disable that program. One that there have been questions about just how successful that operation was, but one that Donald Trump has repeatedly declared was able to obliterate Iran's nuclear facilities. So it's interesting and important to note that Donald Trump, in setting up this show of this arrival ceremony, wanted to have those aircraft in particular on an airbase where you could pick any type of aircraft. Those were the ones that he wanted in the air and on the ground.
All right.
It's also
It's not
important to
that
note-
interesting, honestly. He picked those aircraft. Yeah.
carpet
I
waiting.
mean, he's not going to put F-4 Tomcats out there. Lady, come on.
You look at him. He seems very happy. I'd say quite in high spirits, because he believes that the situation is going into the right direction for him.
Which
And
one, Putin
Americans
or
cannot
Trump?
do anything to prevent from this situation from aggravating for them. So it's not about Putin. It's not that Putin is so
Zelensky
smart,
says on the
but
bottom,
Putin has been
it is time
always
to end the
very
war
lucky
and we are
with his
counting on
counterparts,
America.
because
ahead
they
of the
have
summit.
been always.
So that's weird because he says that it's time to end the war and we're counting on America. But he also says that any deal made during this this meeting holds no bearing on what's going to happen. So, I mean, and rightfully so. Like, Trump can't just be like, all right, you're losing this region and that region and this oblast or whatever. He can't just do that. He can't make those deals anyways. So, I mean, if anything, realistically, this is the start of talks to end the war. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully, the end result is that we get a little bit of insight into if Russia is even going to be willing to work towards that. I mean, Putin might just be doing a free tour of Alaska here, for all we know.
Independence, sovereignty, and even existence, an existential story for him. He cannot do without Ukraine. He must do something with Ukraine. Yeah, and he must subjugate it. And so, if Trump says, "Okay, Vladimir, okay, I don't care about Ukraine. Do what you wish," then I think President Trump may get his temporary ceasefire. I believe very limited, very restricted, and for a very short period of time. But that's what Putin wants. He wants his control over Ukraine as a sign that the Western countries, NATO alliance, United States, do not wish and are very much afraid of the very idea of confronting Putin directly. And that's then his goal, his primary goal of humiliating the West and President Trump and all other European leaders will be achieved. It's very strange and awkward that European leaders cannot, or maybe they won't see it. But that's the situation as it is.
Okay, Boris Bondarev, very interesting. Thank you for joining us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, let's
so down there,
go again to those pictures.
The scrolling headline, it says the Kremlin is saying this will take 6 or 7 hours of talks. Now, I'm not going to stay live for 6 or 7 hours. Boris was basically just saying that this is Putin's chance to kind of embarrass the West and show that he has the upper hand, more or less. Which, I mean, here's the thing. The Russians, they've been making advances recently. Very slowly, but you can't deny it. And there's those 4 regions of Ukraine that they feel entitled to. I'll bring this up real quick. It's this, and I believe this. Let me double check. What regions of Ukraine does Russia want? Because there was 4 of them, I believe. Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. So here's Donetsk, Luhansk. See, this is Zaporizhia, maybe? Yep, Zaporizhia. What was the last one? Kherson, which might be this Kharkiv. Let's see. Kherson, okay. So now it's this, and this. So these 4 regions. And remember, they already took, this is the Crimea. So Russia already has Crimea. They took that a while back, 10 years ago or something like that. So now they're trying to take these 4 regions of land too, which obviously gives them all of this, the Sea of Azov. And right now, Russia partially borders it, but then they share waters with Ukraine. So realistically, they probably want just control of all this water for starters. And then, of course, the land's always, a nice bonus. But doing so would also, because there's this waterway out of Ukraine. And now if Russia gets these 2 lands, now they're going to share these waters, the Dnieper River, which goes out into the Black Sea, which leads to the Mediterranean, which leads to the Atlantic. And of course, there's a canal, the Sinai Canal or something? I can't remember. Is that what it's called? Let's see. Does it say? I won't bring it up. And that, of course, leads to the Arabian Sea, and then the Pacific, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So this is a very strategic block of land here.
Thank you, Press. Let's go. Mr. President. Thank you, Press. President Putin, why should President Trump trust your word now?
Thank you, Press. Thank you, Press.
We've got to go. Thank you.
No speak English.
So neither president answering those questions. A frown from President Putin when asked if he would refrain from killing civilians in Ukraine, and various other shouted questions, but as we saw there, neither president willing to talk. And Martha, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that was just a very brief appearance with the two men. And I wonder, we were just been talking about it just now, I wonder how that was, organized and agreed upon, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why this guy doesn't know it, but they specifically said they were going to meet and it was going to be in private, like a one-on-one with translators type deal. And then following that meeting, they were going to do a press conference. So I don't know why there's these reporters, and I think Sky News is like Australia. So they're interested, but not that interested, I guess.
Vladimir Putin appeared to answer by putting his hands around his mouth to make himself heard. And at that point he said, let's go, and the press were ushered out of the room. He clearly doesn't want to be answering those sort of questions on American soil. There was a translator sat directly to Vladimir Putin's right, and then
I mean, of course he's not going to answer that. When are you going to stop killing civilians? Like, why would he... some of these reporters are just not too bright. Like, you're asking that to Vladimir Putin. You think he's going to give you an answer? Do you really think he's going to answer that question? Come on.
Domestic media representatives are allowed into the room. Clearly, journalists screaming questions over one another, desperate to try and glean anything that they can from the two men in the room. But really, we learned very little.
Well, it's also difficult to see where.
Sky News. Honestly,
agreement
this is kind of disappointing coverage from Sky News. We're going to find somebody else. They don't seem to know what the hell's going on here. All right, we can kind of let this go in the background, but as you can see, they're going to have a press conference. Obviously, this is set up. There's two podiums. This is going to be happening later, and I think this is the Reuters feed. Yeah, Reuters. Now, earlier they were doing like an actual broadcast, but it seems like they're just kind of standing by now. So it's I mean, why would Putin lend like even entertain those questions? You know, why would they, or why would he? But you know, I think Putin is very he's Putin and Trump are same in a lot of ways, but one of the ways they're very different, I think, is that Putin is kind of predictable. Trump, not so much. Trump is he's pretty out there. You don't really know what you're going to get with him, because one day he'll say one thing and then a week later it'll completely change to something else. And then a week after that, it'll be like none of those things ever happened. And that's exactly what happened with I'm giving Russia a 50-day deadline. And then they did a bunch of drone strikes and missile strikes across Ukraine, but particularly in like Kharkov and Kyiv, the capital, and other, you know, well-populated cities. And that was what Putin did right after the 50-day deadline was ushered out. So Trump's response to that was to whittle it down to 10 days. And it was, all right, now you have until August 8th, which of course was a week ago. That was last Friday. And when nothing changed, basically that line in the sand essentially evaporated. So yeah, exactly, MG. And you know, at least they are trying. And here's another, you know, just interesting kind of spin on it is apparently Trump's made it known that he desires to have a Nobel Peace Prize. That's great. I mean, doing good things for, you know, rewards, not necessarily what we look for in society, but if the end result is that there's peace in Ukraine and civilians aren't being murdered and, you know, soldiers aren't being pushed into a meat grinder that inevitably is just going to result in their deaths, then so be it, you know? I mean, if he can pull it off, you know, Trump has helped negotiate a good handful now of peace deals. There was the Lebanon deal between Israel and Lebanon to get Hezbollah out. There was the Cambodia-Thailand deal to stop those hostilities, kind of really before they really started kicking off. A few dozen people died from, you know, artillery strikes and small arms engagements and stuff. But ultimately, you know, that was a conflict that really could have erupted because those two countries have had contentious borders for a long time. So there was that. What else was there? There was, you know, at the beginning of the year, there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. It didn't last, obviously, but a good chunk of the hostages at least were returned. There were some 250 total Israeli hostages held by Hamas, and I think there's only about 50 still in captivity. So Israel has, you know, alive or dead, they've gotten about 80% of them back. So there was that. There was another one I'm trying to think of. Oh yeah, India, Pakistan. Apparently, he had a little bit of his hands in that too, or so he says. So, you know, it's. I think. I mean, what was the name of the book that? What book did Trump write? Well, I guess he wrote a lot of them, but this is the one I was referring to, The Art of the Deal. This has kind of been his shtick over the years, is I know how to make deals. So, now obviously he comes from a business background. So now he's trying to, he's applying that stuff to real world politics. And in some instances, it does seem to be working. If not actual peace deals being brokered, at least there's ceasefires. And, there are people who are living right now who would be dead otherwise, essentially. So whether you like Trump or not, at least he's trying. He did make it a point during the election cycle that he was going to bring an end to this war. I think he said he was going to end it in 72 hours or something. That he might have been talking about Gaza. I can't remember the exact quote, but obviously, this is something like this, such a large scale engagement. It's not just going to evaporate overnight. All right, nobody's talking there at Reuters yet. Let's see what Al Jazeera has to say about it.
Encounter that Vladimir Putin had with an American.
Right, and it's important to face to face with an American leader of any kind since his invasion of Ukraine some 3 years ago or more. So it's all being watched very carefully, but it could be said about both men that their positions vacillate so widely, particularly when it comes to Ukraine and with each other, sometimes praising one another, sometimes criticizing one another, that it's really hard to know when they're being honest and sincere and when they are really working to either manipulate one another or the media. Case in point, when you talk about the U.S. president and his comments about Vladimir Putin, he has praised him as being brilliant as far back as 2007, but only more recently has he gotten tougher, saying that there will be tough economic consequences if he does not agree to at least the first step towards peace at this meeting. As well, we know that the U.S. president has criticized him sharply for the heavy death toll that has taken place in Ukraine. So, again, it's going to be critical to see what comes out of this meeting, not just in terms of what's agreed upon, but how it is conveyed to in front of the cameras. That is really going to be watched closely here in Anchorage.
Kimberly, stick around. We're going to get over to diplomatic editor James Bays, who.
That was an interesting shot there, though, right there with all those Air Force guys. So this air base actually is where I was born, believe it or not. And at the time, my dad was he was a Morse code operator. This was in the 80s, obviously. But they used to do a lot of intercepting Morse code and all that stuff up there. So he was a Morse code operator for several years. It was his first duty station. So kind of interesting that they're doing this here at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage.
What has worried so much the Ukrainians and also their European allies. They remember particularly that meeting. We all remember that meeting that took place in the Oval Office in February when President Trump humiliated Vladimir Zelensky and also blamed him for starting the war. Now, of course, it was 3.5 years ago, Russia that invaded Ukraine, but that is not how President Trump sometimes has portrayed it. And that is why the European leaders have been involved in such intensive diplomacy since this summit.
You know, I will say about that, what he's talking about when Zelensky was in the States, 4 or 5 months ago, and they were doing a live press conference, and there was a back and forth between Zelensky and Trump, and I remember watching that and thinking to myself, what is Zelensky doing? Like, he comes to America, and as soon as the cameras go on, he starts arguing with Trump about how much money the United States has sent in weapons and stuff. And, everybody knows Trump embellishes and exaggerates things. And oftentimes his figures are either high or low, for dramatic effect, so to say. But it was just weird how they went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm watching Zelensky and I'm like, dude, Like, your country's losing this war. It's sad but true. I mean, and it is predictable because Russia is a far bigger country. They have more resources, they have more manpower, they have more everything, bigger economy, etc. So, ultimately, Zelensky doesn't have a whole lot of options, I feel, to end this war. So him, one, arguing with Trump, I don't think really helps his case, but two, also saying Ukraine's never going to seize land or cede land to the Russians. If that's the only proposed solution, then are they just going to keep fighting? And if so, I mean, the United States is no longer gifting weapons or money or supplies or anything to Ukraine. Now NATO has to purchase it and then provide it to the Ukrainians. So oddly enough, that deal has kind of put Ukraine in a weird spot because remember, Russia is very weary of NATO expansion and they don't want NATO countries at their border. So now if Ukraine's weapons are being supplied by NATO, granted, they're coming from the United States, but via NATO, what's that going to look like for the Russians if the war doesn't end soon? Are they going to step things up because NATO's now supplying arms? There's so many different possibilities. Let's see what these guys are saying.
And in NATO, and they've got to try and find a way to work with President Trump because he's only 6 months into his term and he will be the US president for the next 3.5 years. And so I think they've got to find a way, an accommodation to work with President Trump because, of course, if you go the other way and you stand up to President Trump and denounce President Trump, then he will stop working with you completely. And, that's why I think they've been very consistent diplomacy on this issue for the last week ahead of this summit to try and change the parameters of the negotiations, but no denunciation, no tough talk against the US, because they know with President Trump, he can be very combative. That is counterproductive.
James, thanks. James Bay, our diplomatic correspondent, editor, I should say, there in Anchorage. Right, in a moment we're going to be crossing over to Charles Stratford in Kyiv, but let's first of all get over to Moscow and join Osama bin Javed. Osama, give us a sense of what the feeling is on the ground. Recently there have been some claims of Russian troops really winning out on the battlefield. Now, does that change the situation and does it strengthen and gird Vladimir Putin's hand?
Well, the perspective from Moscow has remained that of consistency and strategic silence. Remember, in the last week, there is very little that you've heard from the Kremlin and the foreign ministry, whereas you had the foreign ministers of all of Europe and President Zelensky doing multiple rounds. What you did hear from Vladimir Putin was call this effort by the US president sincere. So at hand extending towards President Trump, where you see it has been responded to by President Trump probably applauding him as he walked towards him. This is the scene here is that we spoke to a member of the Duma who told us that they will not be talking to anyone about this progress until the president speaks first. And they are not sure what that is going to look like because the Ukrainians need to leave all of their aspirations according to the Russians. They need to leave all of the territory that the Russians have overtaken. And they need to assure them that they will not be used as a staging point against Russia. That is what the demand has been and it has remained so far until the beginning of this meeting. So it will be interesting to see how the United States president can persuade Vladimir Putin to actually change his mind. And that is the feeling here that many people, according to people who've been speaking to people who are like pundits, who are experts, analysts, academics, they see this as a win. They see this, that their president has been winning, as what we've been seeing from the Russian MOD, are briefs after briefs of battlefield advantages that they've gained, areas they've consolidated. They say that they're only 30 kilometers from Kharkiv. So those are the kind of things that people here have been listening to. They feel they have the advantage on the battlefield. They see that their president has been able to cut off the US president from the rest of the pack of the West. And now they're hoping that there could be some sort of a breakthrough where these 3.5 years could be put behind and these two countries could come to a peaceful negotiated settlement.
Osama, President Trump has warned that if this meeting fails to de-escalate the situation on the ground there in Ukraine, he's threatened Vladimir
so
Putin
far,
with
all you
severe
missed
consequences. Presumably,
was the both of these guys stepping off the plane, shaking hands. They sat in this room right here, said basically nothing, and then Trump goes, "All right, thank you very much," and then they kicked all the press out. So right now they're doing their kind of one-on-one with their translators and maybe their, high-ranking diplomats. They're going to be going through their talks as we speak, and then we're waiting for the joint press conference that is going to air whenever this is done. Now, Trump said he thought it was going to be pretty quick, and the Kremlin is saying it might take 6 or 7 hours before this conversation comes to an end. So we're going to hang around for a while. We're going to see how long it does take. If it's we're 3 hours in and we still don't have a press conference, we might just have to call it there. But hopefully, we get some questions answered. There was a lot of reporters shouting questions at Putin. Predictable stuff that he's obviously never going to answer. Stuff like, when will you stop killing civilians? And, American press, very standard. So, yeah, we'll see. I assume the press conference is going to start with some sort of announcement that these two countries have talked. Some sort. This is not going to be we've reached an agreement type thing. But, it might be a general announcement that both countries are looking for a peaceful solution to Ukraine. Now, the great question is that what Putin is actually thinking in his mind? Is he just playing games with the West? Because, this is his opportunity to kind of toy with some of the most powerful nations in the world and be like, oh, yes, we're about to stop, and then not do it. The thing is, Russia has been making gains in Ukraine recently, and they've made it very clear that they intend on taking this region. This is the Luhansk, this region, the Donetsks, this region, the Zaporizhzhia, and this region, the Kherson. So they're trying to take these 4 regions from Ukraine, thus giving them this whole sea right here. And then, of course, they already have this, which is the Crimea. Now, are they going to suddenly stop that and agree to not take these lands that they've more or less they have a good percentage of these regions right here. So, is anything that happens today going to matter? Actually having a play on the outcome here? We don't know. If not Trump, then who else will find a way through this? Yeah, no, exactly. Here's the thing. This has been going on for 3.5 years, and what other world leaders have stepped up and really tried to and put an end to this? I mean, the United Nations and NATO has been pretty hands off with it. I know obviously Ukraine's not a NATO country. However, you do have to look at the full situation and ask yourself, as NATO, do you want Russia taking more territory? Getting closer to you? Russia says they feel threatened by the expansion in NATO. Well, they are moving closer towards NATO countries by claiming territory in Ukraine. So Putin talking with Trump is like Mr. Garrison talking to Mr. Han. Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, these are the leaders of the two of the most powerful nations in the world. Between Russia and the United States, that's something like 15,000 nuclear warheads. Does Russia have? Let's see. Russia has 5,500. Okay, so it's about 9,000 nuclear missiles, known nuclear missiles. So, I mean, we could, we can make the comparisons to our favorite, you know, crazy caricatured characters of South Park or whatever. But at the end of the day, this is what we're stuck with. And, maybe if some European leaders would have stepped up, we wouldn't be more or less relying on Donald Trump of all people to get it done. So it is the situation we're in. Right now, Vladimir Putin is in America. He's in Alaska. He's in the base that I was born in, which is pretty wild to think about. Pretty wild. But, if the fighting's over in 3 months, that, I don't think a lot of people are going to be upset about that unless, the condition is Ukraine has to cede this territory, those 4 regions that we pointed out there on the TV, on the map.
So they say 286 civilians were killed, well over 1,000 injured. So on that basis, you can imagine
I think he's talking about recent missile strikes.
A desperate sense of hope of some sort of beginning to an end of this conflict, but not at any cost, and great distrust, as I say, not only of Vladimir Putin, but to a lesser extent, Donald Trump also.
Charles, thanks.
So to me, it seems like, because Russia has really stepped up their drone and missile strikes lately. So it seems like they're trying to, in this last phase, when they know talks are about to start, they're trying to really just break the will of the Ukrainian people so they can claim those territories, essentially. And now, but if Ukraine's not willing to give that up, which Zelensky has said there will be no land swaps or anything of that matter. If that's the case, then what is Putin going to do? Stop the war? I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like if Ukraine doesn't give up those regions, he's probably going to go for more. And yet at the same time, if Ukraine does give up those regions, you're kind of playing into Putin's hand. What's to stop him 5 years from now from doing the same thing? Putin, he is older. He definitely seems to be getting around well. Let's look at his age. Oh, he's 72.
That he sets deadlines and then he doesn't follow through on them. And he looked weak with that. So now he needs to really show that his backing down was actually some kind of a grand diplomatic masterstroke, and it's going to lead to some concessions, because otherwise it's going to look like he's caved into an adversary.
And just back on the topic of other world leaders and stuff, in regards to this particular situation, I think when it first started, it was kind of like a popular, trendy thing to, we support Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. But it seemed to be a lot of words, especially from European nations. I mean, we've on this show, we've looked into how much Russian oil and gas European nations have purchased since the start of this war. Now it's gone down quite a bit. I think now it's like a third of what it was starting. It's only about a third of what it was when it started. But they're still making those purchases. And none of those countries in Europe are stepping up to try and end this. Now, you've got the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Belgium, I believe, and a few other countries in Europe have all said they support the two-state solution, with Palestine becoming its own country. So they've all stepped up and made big statements in regards to that conflict, but not this one. So who will it be to end this, if not Trump? Which is it's a really sad situation for the Ukrainian people of all, more so than anyone. The Ukrainian people are the ones suffering the most for this.
For Ukrainian security guarantees at the Oval Office. That was part of what catalyzed the whole beratement from J.D. Vance and from Trump against him. And the whole "you don't have the cards" narrative really started with Zelensky saying, we're not going to take Putin at face value. We're not going to trust him. Russia's broken the Budapest Memorandum. They broke the Minsk Accords, and they'll break this agreement again unless there's concrete backing of some sort. So basically, what does Trump mean by security guarantees? He doesn't seem to want Ukraine to be officially a member of NATO, but what he'd be referring to is often what's called in Washington the NATO minus solution, effectively providing heavy weaponry, infrastructure, advanced technology, and some troops and peacekeepers on the ground, giving Ukraine NATO-style defensive cover, but not the guarantee of a full-scale bloc intervention if Russia were to break the ceasefire. So Ukraine almost gets to the level of protection that the Baltic states and Poland have, but just under that because there isn't that ironclad guarantee of intervention, just lots of material support.
So, thank you so much for that, Samir Rahmani there from the Royal United Institute in London.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Further live coverage expected. Okay. Cameras are down there.
And on Twitter,
Sky News seemed pretty out of the loop earlier. So there's some protests going on outside of this event. So some of these signs say, "Stand with Ukraine," "Something is a traitor," "No kings," "Stand with Ukraine," "No Trump, no Putin." Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Some signs in Russian, it looks like. And Arabic. And German. She's got all sorts of languages going on there. A bear eating a Trump fish. All right. Resist evil. Peace for Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Summit or a dictator's affair. I don't know if I can see that full sign. America needs Ukraine. Alaska stands with Ukraine. War crimes are not negotiable. That's the other interesting thing is Putin has an arrest warrant out by the International Criminal Court for this war. So technically right now the United States is harboring a world wanted criminal. Wild. Here we go. Fuck Trump and fuck Putin. Straight to the point. Gotta respect it. Let's see what they're saying here.
I mean, it's not that long of a flight, guys. I mean, it really isn't.
Fight, truth, DK. Not familiar with that one. I will say this is a lot of excitement for Alaska. It's not very often stuff like this happens there. That's for sure.
In our homeland, the war is still ongoing. For many, returning his own destruction
Trump is
danger, and loss.
on the list.
Here in the United States, families are losing their jobs because their work permits have expired. Parents live in fear, children suffer from anxiety and trauma, and uncertainty.
So there's a pretty decent amount of protesters down the street. It seems like they're going all the way down. So there's definitely hundreds.
We're asking
Several
for the
hundred, maybe.
opportunity to work, to pay taxes, and to serve the country that has sheltered us. We want to be its strength, not its burden. Even if temporary protected status.
I mean, for a U.S. protest, this is very, very calm, very chill. Hopefully it stays this way.
Since the hold on approvals was lifted, there have been almost no re-parole proclamation.
What's that sign say? Alaska Native. No Putin, war criminal. Trump is a pedo. Oh, man. Some wild sides there. Huge concerns about what Trump would be willing to give up for a PR win, yeah. And what Putin could squeeze out of him in exchange for vague promises of a deal, yeah. That's the thing, is Putin is predictably untrustworthy. Very predictably untrustworthy. And that's, you know, what I was saying about, like, let's just say a couple months from now, Ukraine caves and they say, all right, take those 4 regions you want. I think Putin would look at that and be like, well, maybe I can take some more. You just got to bleed them out over time. And that's what happens sometimes in war. When one country is much bigger than the other, they can just bleed them out. Pretend to be playing nice when you're not. Keep all your goals. And I mean, lately they've been bombing them into submission, it seems. They said over the last few weeks it was something like 200 some civilians killed, another 1,000 plus wounded, injured. Putin has proven he's not afraid of doing immoral things in broad daylight. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a lot of people's point right now. And I think we were watching Al Jazeera earlier, and they were talking about some of like the online reaction from Ukrainians, and now all they chose to share, of course, was the negative reactions to this. But you know, reasonably so, a lot of Ukrainians are not happy about this. This guy's been bombing the crap out of them. He, at the start of the war, they went and stole a bunch of children from Ukraine and brought them over to Russia. They've held people hostage. They've executed innocent civilians and captured soldiers against the Geneva Conventions. You know, when someone's done that to you for 3.5 years, and then you watch, and then the United States invites them over for dinner and a meeting, and also excludes your leader. Yeah, exactly. Here, this sign right here. Dude, where's my invite? Like, this is one of the wildest things about this meeting, is that Zelensky was specifically not invited to it. And they're talking about his country right now. It's really sad for the Ukrainians because, like, you can see that they don't have much power, much bargaining power in this situation now. It's really sad. Putin openly murders his critics. Exactly. There was the commander of one of the Russian military contractors. What were they called? The Wagner Group. The commander from the Wagner Group. He was the plane he was on got blown up or something like that. So he routinely, people who speak out against Putin, they either end up in the gulags or they end up dead one way or another, mysteriously dead. And a lot of times those people that are killed, they're not even killed in Russia, they're killed in other countries too. The Russian mafia, government mafia, so to speak, will track you down. They will find you and they will kill you. And remember, you know, Putin is ex-KGB.
But that's going to start at about 1:30, and so we need all the help.
So let's see. Yes, Vladimir Putin was a KGB officer. He served for 15 years as a foreign intelligence officer in the KGB, the Foreign Intelligence and Domestic Security Agency of the Soviet Union. He retired from active KGB service in 1990 with the rank of lieutenant colonel. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he transitioned into politics, and then, of course, in 99, I think it was, he became the leader of Russia for the first time. So yeah, he's the KGB masters of the radioactive bullet. Yeah, exactly. There's you don't know what to expect from this guy. I almost half expected Trump was gonna, like, I don't know, have him arrested or something. You know, I mean, there's so many different, you know, with Trump, he's completely unpredictable. With Putin, you know what you're getting. You know, Putin is not unpredictable. It's easy to think that Putin's just playing a game right now. He may say, oh, yes, I agree to that. He's not going to agree to nothing. He wants what he wants, and he's probably not going to stop until he gets it. I think Trump knows that, but I also think Trump has so much confidence in himself that he thinks he can change that. Which is, I mean, you got to be pretty narcissistic to think you can change Putin's mind, if you know anything about Vladimir Putin. Yeah, who would it be? No, I think MG's saying, like who on the world stage right now would make this attempt, so to speak? Because it doesn't seem like direct talks just between the two countries is going to work, which is kind of why this is happening. And I mean, they've had some other talks that were supposed to happen in, I want to say Turkey maybe, but between, you know, Ukrainian and Russian officials, but they ended up getting canceled, and that was recently too. The chants have begun. Yeah, that's kind of where I am, MG, is like, Zelensky seems like he's not going to submit, and Putin's definitely not going to submit. So, I mean, how long is this going to drag on for? But at the same time, if it stops, and the reason it stops is that Russia gets those 4 territories, then is that going to be the end of this? Is it like, oh, it's not because if you've been paying attention, it's every 10 years or so, 5 to 10 years, Russia, you know, they're invading Chechnya, they're invading Georgia rather, they're invading Ukraine multiple times now. I think this is like the second or third time in the last 15 years that they've done it. Well, I don't think Putin's goals are completely unknown. Russia has stated they want these 4 regions. They've made it very apparent about that. Now, is that actually all they want? These regions? Probably not. They seem to have a sense of entitlement to the country of Ukraine. But also, I don't think they want to get that much further out west. Because now you're dealing with NATO countries. There's been, some people have said they want everything east of the Dnieper River. So all of these territories. Now, that's kind of predictable, because if they get these 4, guess what? They've got about a third, maybe even a little more than a third of this eastern slice of Ukraine right here. So this could just be the start of them sectioning off this entire area.
Where are you from? Estonia. Oh my God, thank you. Thank you. They like coffee there more than Alaskans do.
Don't buy property.
Estonians like
I
coffee
believe
more
what
than
they've
even
stated
Alaskans
as their
do.
goals. Putin wants something from the West more than he wants land in Ukraine. We're just not privy to what. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's been a long power struggle between Russia and or the USSR and these Western countries. It's been happening for a long time. So what does he actually want from the United States? He probably wants the United States to stop funding the war against him. And then I believe they also want Alaska back. The United States purchased Alaska from the Russians, I want to say in the mid-1800s, maybe? Let me see. When did the U.S. get Alaska? 1867, right after the Civil War. Purchase price was $7.2 million. So we basically stole Alaska from Russia. President Andrew Johnson signed that. All right. Very interesting. How many wars in human history were stopped by reason? Many of them are stopped when all resources have been exhausted, which is, unfortunately, that's when reason steps in for a lot of people. When countries are just too far gone to fight anymore. Leia 2, how you doing, my friend? But yeah, these 4 regions could just be the start of what they want, and that might be why Zelensky is so adamant about not giving it up. Yeah, reason is the last option. Yeah, oftentimes. I mean, just look at, what's happening right now in Gaza. You've got hundreds and hundreds of Israeli ex-intelligence, ex-military, just pleading for them to not go into Gaza City.
Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey,
It's a weird protest because everybody wants the war to end, but they also want Trump and Putin gone. I know. We all have our wish lists, right? Unfortunately, none of them are going to happen. But yeah, you're Ukrainian? Well, I really hope favorable things happen for you. This is a really just difficult situation for the Ukrainians. I just said maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago that I really do feel for the people of Ukraine right now. You've got Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin talking about your future, and that's not it's not an ideal situation. So I'm very very sympathetic for you, my friend. Yeah, do you trust Zelensky? You have no hope? Yeah. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of Ukrainians who share that sentiment, because this has been a 3.5-year-long war now. Very long. And, I would reason that the leaders of the world, whether it was, Biden over the last few years or the rest of Europe, they've really just kind of, it's like they've thrown money at Ukraine, they've thrown supplies at it, but that's been about it for the most part. I mean, sadly, this is kind of the biggest effort from the West to really put an end to this, is Trump inviting a war criminal to the United States to try and begin talks. Law about corruption. Yeah, Leia 2, I saw that. I didn't read too much into it, but I saw basically they were trying to silence, I think, some government opposition, and there was a lot of people in Ukraine who were not happy about it, but I think they went through with it anyways. Yeah, really sad that that's happening in Ukraine. Logan. Hopefully Putin hasn't read The Art of the Deal or Trump's going to be in trouble. Yeah. Yeah, very true. But, I mean, Putin is a rigid negotiator, I think.
I don't know whether you could
Rigid
hear
negotiator
that. We
in
were
that
talking about the
you know
two
whatever he agrees to.
contrasting
It's not gonna
teams
stick.
with the.
Let's see, all right, we're still chilling here with Reuters. Hopefully this press conference comes in the next few hours or less. That would be nice. All right, that's the Hill.
So how does one remove them from him?
All right, let's see what old Al Jazeera has to say here.
Pressure and economic pressure, and President Trump has the ability to turn up the pressure. He's threatened Putin numerous times.
Yeah.
We've seen his language
Biden
change
read it, but
in
he
the
doesn't
last
remember.
month or so. He's gotten increasingly
about
fed
right.
up with Vladimir Putin as he sees that his
That
discussions.
it was a very lackluster response from the Biden administration when this war kicked off. It was surprising how large scale it was. I mean, not in a sense that we saw the buildup. It was something like 150, 200,000 troops built up on the Ukrainian border for weeks up until the invasion actually kicked off. And you know, the United States government response under the Biden administration was pretty lackluster, but so was the rest of Europe's. And then it was kind of just, yeah, we'll just throw weapons at them and hopefully they can handle it themselves. Obviously, you know, the United States is not going to go and fight. We're not going to provide soldiers to fight the Russians. It's never going to happen. But is providing missiles and all that really that different from the viewpoint of the United States? Like, I don't know. It's a weird situation. Because ultimately, the majority of the deaths, or maybe not the majority, but maybe half or so of the casualties that Russia has suffered has been at the hands of United States weapons that were launched towards them. So this whole situation is crazy. It really is. Vladimir Putin is in the United States of America right now, talking to Donald Trump about the future of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian president was not invited. Now, they have said that this hopefully would be the precipice for like trilateral talks or multinational talks where Ukraine would be included. Because obviously there is not going to be any sort of deal without the Ukrainian government agreeing to it. So, you know, Putin and Trump can talk all day about possible solutions. But at the end of the day, they got to take something to the Ukrainians that results in peace. And if Zelensky is adamant about not giving up any of those four regions, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and what was the last one? What was the last one? This one. Luhansk, yeah. So if Zelensky is adamant about not giving up these four, yeah, the world's definitely fucked up, yeah. Leia 2, we absolutely agree with that. And right now, I mean, I've talked about this on the show quite a few times, but this strip of the world, you've got Ukraine right here with everything going on with Ukraine and Russia. Directly south of that, you've got Israel and everything going on in the Middle East with Lebanon and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Yemen, all these countries. And then south of that, you've got everything going on in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Rwanda, in the Congo, and it's all on this one strip. This longitude of the world, man, it's just ran out of luck, it seems. Completely run out of luck. Other than Azerbaijan and Armenia. They've got a nice little peace question mark deal going on here. We don't know. Maybe there will be peace there. We will see.
And before we leave things, Melinda, it's a good question I've been asking all our guests, and that is, what does a successful summit look like?
So the foreign, what is it? The foreign envoy, Steve, Witkoff, I think it is. Yeah, Steve Witkoff. So he is currently special envoy to the Middle East. And on top of that, he's also the special envoy for this. This guy, he's handling Israel, Gaza, Iran, and also this Ukraine and everything happening. Man, I just wish this camera would stop doing whatever the hell it wants to do. I can't talk with my hands because I get zoomed in on over and over. All right. Anyways, so it's all Steve Witkoff doing all this. This one guy. So you got to wonder. Let's see. He co-founded Stellar Management Real Estate. He's a real estate guy? I mean, I guess it's par for the course, right? But yeah, this is the guy. In April 2020, during the first presidency, Witkoff was a member of the Great American Economic Revival Industry Group, which was created by Trump to combat the economic impact of COVID-19. And then in 2024, in July, he gave a speech on night 4 of the Republican National Convention. In September of 2024, he was playing golf with Trump. He was playing Trump when that second assassination attempt happened. And then on November 9th, Witkoff was chosen to co-chair the Presidential Inaugural Committee for Trump's second presidency. And then on November 12th, Trump announced that he had selected Witkoff as a special envoy to the Middle East, and Witkoff had no diplomatic experience. That is incredible. We've got some of the biggest events in warfare history happening right now between the Israeli takeover of Gaza and first the Hamas attack to the Israelis, and then the Israeli response and everything that's entailed in Lebanon and Iran and the West Bank and Gaza and surrounding areas. You had everything that happened in Syria, where ex-Al-Qaeda are now running the Syrian government, and the United States government has taken them off of the terrorist list. And then you have the largest war that the European continent has seen in 80 years, since World War II. And the special envoy, the United States' #1 diplomat to all of those current events happening, all of which are unprecedented for decades, is a guy who was a real estate CEO and has no diplomatic experience. Witkoff played a key role in negotiating a ceasefire and hostage exchange between Israel and Hamas in 2025, in January of this year, alongside Brett McGurk, who was Biden's lead negotiator, who had invited Witkoff to join the negotiations. So this must have been happening as Trump was taking office then, because you had Biden's guy. It was in January, and Trump assumed office in like mid-January of this year. So there were some Biden folks, and then also Witkoff, and then the Qatari Prime Minister, Al-Thani. Okay, so they kind of made that first exchange happen. Wow, this is really wild. I did not know that about Steve Witkoff. This is Witkoff meeting Putin back in August 6th. So this was about not quite 10 days ago. Here he is with Saudis. There's Rubio. This is in Riyadh with the Saudis, who, of course, were very happy when the United States and Israel was bombing the crap out of Iran. Very happy indeed. At least W at evil geniuses like Rumsfeld and Cheney. Who is Trump listening to? Real estate moguls? Yeah. It's kind of wild. Now, I mean, I guess we give the guy a chance just because he doesn't have diplomatic experience. I will say with diplomats, after a certain amount of time, they kind of get used to doing things in a certain, there's like a quid pro quo, like a certain kind of way that you do shit as a diplomat. So I could see how, maybe the angle of having someone who does things their own way, maybe that could potentially facilitate things moving along faster than they would with, your standard career diplomat. Maybe. I'm trying to see the optimism here. Yeah, no, I mean, it's very, yeah, there he is with Netanyahu. So he's been all over the place. He's met with some guys that are doing some things around the world. This is, who are they with here? Ukrainian. Okay, this is with some Ukrainians. Foreign Minister Sibiha, Defense Minister Umarov, Presidential Advisor Yermak. Okay. So this was in France back in April. So Rubio and Witkoff here met with some Ukrainians. Okay. In March, okay, here's some views. In March 2025, he expressed concern that Israel's war in Gaza could destabilize Middle Eastern countries such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Very true. He stated that the youth unemployment rate in Egypt is 45% and that the country is bankrupt. Also true, saying that a country can't exist like that. They're largely broke and they need help. That Egypt, it does have a lot of people and a fairly sizable military. And it was in the 2010s that Mubarak was ousted, not long ago. So Egypt's not necessarily the most stable country. On Syria, he suggested that al-Sharaa may have changed his association with al-Qaeda. This is Syria's new leader who, of course, is no longer listed as a terrorist by the United States government. Witkoff criticized the Biden administration over its decision to halt the shipment of bombs to Israel. However, he's also stated that Hamas members are not as ideologically extreme as they are portrayed, and praised Qatar for its efforts to negotiate an end to the Gaza conflict. It's a weird stance to say Hamas are not as ideologically extreme. All right. March, Witkoff said that Netanyahu, by renewing attacks, was prioritizing the destruction of Hamas. Let's see, Russia and Ukraine. In 2018, Witkoff opposed sanctions against Russia for its occupation of Crimea. So we were talking earlier about how Russia pretty much already has Crimea. They have for a while. Witkoff has praised Putin and has appeared to support Russian government claims about its war against Ukraine. He said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was not necessarily started by Russia, that NATO had a significant role in provoking the conflict, and that most Eastern Ukrainians want to live under Russian rule. All right, well, now we need to read we need to read where this comes from. All right, this is from RussiaMatters.org. Okay, so before we even read this, who is RussiaMatters.org? About Russia Matters. Okay, that's coming from Russia Matters. Is a project launched in 2016 by Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. So Russia Matters is a Harvard think tank? Harvard Kennedy School, Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. It's a project launched in 2016 by Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Science and made possible with support from the Carnegie Corporation and Stanton Foundation. The specific aims of Russia Matters are to help U.S. policymakers and the general public gain a better understanding of why and how Russia matters to the United States now and in the foreseeable future, and what drivers propel the two countries' policies in areas of mutual concern. ensure that U.S. policies toward Russia are conducive to the advancement of long-term U.S. vital national interests, but that they also improve cooperation in areas where interests converge and mitigate friction in areas of divergence, and to foster a new generation of Russian experts. Russia Matters likewise endeavors to build bridges between academy and the policymaking community. It is our sincere hope that this endeavor will advance a viable, analytically rigorous U.S. policy on Russia, guided by realism, verifiable facts, and national interests without sacrificing opportunities for bilateral cooperation. Okay, so that tells you who Russia Matters is. That is, they're started by Harvard Kennedy School and helped funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York as to why Russia and U.S. relations are important. So there's, maybe a little bias, but I don't think this is necessarily a malicious thing, more like a learning of why these two superpowers at least have to deal with one another, rather. So this is them saying what Steve Witkoff's opinions are. Let's see. Steve Witkoff, a New York real estate magnate and longtime associate of Trump, was initially appointed to serve as Trump's special envoy for the Middle East. Real quick, I want to get this back on. We'll bring up Reuters. I just want to make sure, okay, they're showing protests outside. Cool. I just want to make sure we don't miss, the press conference once it happens. Initially appointed to serve as Trump's special envoy for the Middle East. Yeah, you getting worked up? Yeah. No, this stuff is wild. I did not know any of this stuff. Yeah, he's happy to be a war criminal. I mean, I guess they're going to smile and shake hands, Let's see. So would you go to a used car salesman for surgery? Because he might. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm trying to see the bright side and why he would appoint a friend who's also a real estate guy. It's hard to. You really got to spitball to try and see the bright side of it. Foreign policy is one of the most information dense and convoluted disciplines. Very true. International relations, extremely difficult. You got to know a lot to be successful in international relations. There is, at least in government, I just don't agree with throwing any old rich guy at it. Yeah. I mean, seriously. Like, what's this guy's credentials that he's interested? I mean, I'm interested in the stuff. Why don't they appoint me to be the special envoy to Russia and Ukraine? At least I'm a military veteran. Oh, man. Trump isn't Putin's sock puppet? Yeah. At least it's not Russia Today. Yeah. No, it's not Russia Today. I do have them as a source. Just every once in a while. I've got the Kyiv Independent as well. But sometimes I like to bounce them off each other just to see what the two different sources say on the same event. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's wild. So anyways, let's see. What does Witkoff have to say up here? However, his portfolio has expanded and now prominently features U.S.-Russia relations, and specifically ending the war in Ukraine. Witkoff is an animal. This is a quote. He's a tough New York real estate guy. A source close to Trump told The Telegraph when describing why and how Witkoff has ended up in such a high-profile role. Indeed, despite his lack of prior formal... Here, let me zoom this in a little bit so you guys can see as well. All right. Indeed, despite his lack of prior formal diplomatic experience and Russia's absence from his official job description, Witkoff managed to secure the release of American Mark Fogel. Okay, so that happened earlier in the year from Russian custody in mid-February in exchange for a Russian cryptocurrency kingpin. All right. During his visit to Moscow to win that release, Witkoff was also granted an audience with Putin, with the two reportedly discussing the Russian-Ukrainian war and other issues on the bilateral agenda for over 3 hours, with Trump's official envoy for the for the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Keith Kellogg essentially sidelined. Witkoff also joined White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Secretary of State Mark Rubio for initial talks with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia. That was back in February as well. In his comments on the war, Witkoff has echoed Trump in arguing the conflict as having been partly provoked, in quotations, citing factors like discussions of NATO expansion, and he believes that a resolution to the conflict requires concessions from both Kyiv and Moscow. So, Ukraine for a long time has wanted to become part of NATO. I think this is probably exactly why. It's because they've felt threatened by Russia for a long time. And so I think what they're saying is that basically Ukraine provoked this war by wanting to be part of NATO. Is that what the viewpoint is? Yeah, exactly. Like this is a really weird viewpoint. This is one of those alternate history things, where they tell you, well, the Nazis, they weren't really that bad. He says his primary stated objective is to end the carnage, advocating for a temporary ceasefire. Proposal Ukraine did agree to back in March in Saudi Arabia as an initial step towards broader peace agreements. Witkoff expressed optimism in his public statements, highlighting positive dialogue with both Russian and Ukrainian representatives. Furthermore, he anticipates significant U.S.-Russia economic cooperation after a peace settlement. At the same time, Witkoff, who is expected to meet Putin in Russia again this week, has pushed back against the idea that Ukraine is excluded from the talks. So he's pushing back against the idea that Ukraine is excluded from the talks as Witkoff, Trump, and Putin have a conference in which Ukraine is excluded from the talks. This is a little mind-boggling here. My goodness. As stated above, auto mod. What do we do? Provoked, classic wife beater. Yeah, exactly. Wife beater logic. Yeah, exactly. As stated above, Witkoff's background as a real estate attorney and developer. The background is as that a friend of Trump's since the 80s. Witkoff has been a fundraiser, political advisor, and golfing buddy for the president. He was also dispatched to improve relations with Trump's Republican rivals during the 2024 election, and he donated $2 million. He donated money, notably was among those, when that second assassination attempt happened. That was September of last year, about a year ago. Compilation of Witkoff's views is part of Russia Matters Competing Views rubric, where we share prominent American figures' takes on issues pertaining to Russia, U.S.-Russian relations, and the broader U.S. policies affecting Russia. All sections may be updated with new or past statements. Okay. So, U.S. and Russian priorities for the bilateral agenda, nuclear security, no comments. North Korean nuclear and missile problems, no comments. Iran and its programs. The president will not allow a bomb to be gotten by the Iranians. Not going to happen. We're not going to that place. Hopefully, we can resolve it diplomatically. Obviously, we dropped 10 or something GBU 47s, 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs on Iran about 2 months ago. The humanitarian impact of the conflict in Ukraine. I think we've had, by my estimation, almost 1.5 million deaths there. Finally, we have a leader in President Trump who is determined to end the carnage. So the only way you're going to end the carnage is if you have a relationship with the leaders of both countries that are involved. Military and security aspects of the Ukrainian conflict and their impacts. No comments. Military aid to Ukraine. Okay, here's what he thinks on the aid to Ukraine. My best understanding is that we never shut off intelligence sharing for anything defensive that the Ukrainians need. On the suspension of military equipment supplies to Ukraine, this is kind of recent. I think that aid was shut off for a bit of time. I am not sure where we are. That is a better question for the National Security Advisor. I think the National Security Advisor, I believe, is what's that gal's name from Hawaii? Tulsi Gabbard, I think, right? Zelensky's apology letter to Trump. I think Trump felt that Zelensky's letter was a very positive first step. There was an apology. There was an acknowledgement that the United States has done a lot for the country of Ukraine. That's presumably after their meeting earlier in the year when Trump and Zelensky were kind of going back and forth. So, yeah. Provoked is one of the main arguments from very start of the yeah exactly, Leo, too. The Ukrainians were provoking Russia as Russia built up 100,000 or 200,000 or 250,000, however many troops it was on the border. It's just mind-boggling to adopt that point of view here, and that's whether you're a Trump fan or not. To say that Ukraine provoked the war, Ukraine is I think we've done the population comparison. Ukraine population 37 million, Russia population 143. So just numerically speaking, so 144 million. 144 million divided by, what was it? Ukraine pop 37 million. So that's divided by 37. Okay, so Ukraine has one person for about every 4 people that Russia has. So it's about 4 times bigger just in terms of population. Now, land size, it's much bigger and has, I think, a lot more resources, raw materials. Ukraine has a lot of really valuable like farmland, and they do have some natural resources as well. Some raw minerals and stuff. But overall, I mean, Russia has vastly more resources for fighting a war, and whether it's people or military equipment, or I mean, just look at Russia, the size of Russia, and now look at Ukraine. I mean, geez, you could fit like probably, God, 15 Ukraines into Russia. I mean, Russia is a massive country. I think it is the biggest country in the world, even after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Rubio's the acting national security advisor. I thought he was the Secretary of State. What about North Koreans and Russian troops? Yeah, well, and that's another crazy thing about this, is Leo, too, is that the North Koreans have been making artillery shells and other weapons for the Russians for a while. And on top of that, now, as of, I think earlier this year was the first time, but they provided like something like 5 or 6,000 troops to the Russians, and they were, I think, essentially wiped out, all of them. But now the North Koreans, my apologies, the North Koreans are providing more troops to the Russians because the Russians are giving the North Koreans nuclear technology and all that good stuff. Military technology, raw goods that they can use to develop into different stuff. So this war has really empowered North Korea, because now they're playing, this tiny little country, one of the most oppressive countries in the entire world, is now playing a part in this war in Ukraine by providing both artillery shells and manpower to the Russians. And you're right. Not a lot of people have really talked about that. That's why they occupied part of the Donetsk Oblast, because there is a lot of coal. Okay, so there is a lot of coal and stuff. And I know, isn't there oil around this region somewhere too? Or like oil refineries somewhere? And then I know there's nuclear power plants. I mean, this is, plus there's the water. So you're talking about, shipping and all that. And then if Ukraine, or I'm sorry, Russia does get these Ukrainian regions right here, Now they're right on the Dnieper River, sharing that with the Ukrainians, which they're never going to be happy about in Ukraine, having to share these waters with Russia. Ooh, no good. You remember this right here, the Crimea is long been occupied. Let's look that up. How long has Russia occupied the Crimea? Let's see what AI has to say. Russia began the occupation. This is back in 2014, so it's been over a decade. It's occurred during the events of Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity. More specifically, Russian special forces, without identifying insignia, seized strategic sites across Crimea, initiating the occupation and paving the way for annexation. So this has been a long time coming, really. And this is, I was talking about this earlier, maybe part of the reason why Zelensky is not willing to negotiate is because they saw first they took Crimea. And so now if they take this, what's to stop them from wanting this region and this region and this region? That's really where I think the Ukrainians are at. From 2014, yeah. Over 10 years they've been there. And they had some other stuff going on. I think wasn't that when they were fighting Georgia too, somewhere around there? And then Chechnya. Where's Chechnya? Is this? I don't think this is Chechnya. Where is Chechnya? Somewhere. Oh, I guess it is just considered Russia now. Yeah, so this used to be, I think, its own country, wasn't it? Was Chechnya its own country? Officially, the Chechen Republic is a de facto semi-independent autonomous republic of Russia. Huh. So it's a republic of Russia that's semi-autonomous. Crazy. Back then, they invaded Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Okay, so they have invaded these areas. This is Donetsk and this is Luhansk right here. So they invaded those regions back in the mid-2000s as well. Here's Mariupol. We've heard a lot about this city, very important port city. And I think, isn't this where there's a nuclear plant too? That might have been somewhere else. I can't remember. But I think earlier in the war, there was a very, very long battle that lasted in Mariupol, if I remember right. I think a lot of Russians were just kind of surrounded and ended up having to fight to the last man. Really sad. Oh, that was Zaporizhzhia, is the nuclear plant, which is this region, and that's where the city of Zaporizhzhia is. I know I'm probably saying this terribly. Pardon my English. My lack of I've been to many places in the world, but unfortunately I never made it this far east. I think the furthest east I ever made, well, besides of course Iraq and Afghanistan, down there, but in as far as I've been here, been to Prague. I think that was about as far east as I went in Europe, though. So yeah, all the Slavic words are very hard for me. Very difficult. All right, let's see. Anything happening?
Been speaking to who say that there's a lot of sacrifices that people have made, and there should.
I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. I'll be back in just a sec.
Russia has taken and its stranglehold on all of those areas that it has been put in, not just in the last 3.5 years, and you're also seeing that push happening in the last few days and weeks as well.
Osama, thank you very much indeed. Osama bin Javed there, joining us from Moscow. We can stay in Moscow and join Alexander Bratersky. He's an independent journalist and specialist in Russian foreign policy, and he's in the Russian capital. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexander. Now, we don't know a lot of how this meeting is going, of course, naturally, but give us a sense of what you read into the greeting that the two gave each other upon landing in Anchorage.
Well, actually, yes, of course. Those are just, words of greetings and actually good hugs and so on. And yes, President Putin and President Trump are actually nice to see each other. But of course, there's going to be a tough talk behind closed doors, I assume, because let's see, we can see that President Putin is actually, yes, he's winning in Ukraine. The Russian army is much more stronger than the Ukrainian army, and that's an objective reason. But at the same time, Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump would not meet if there would not be some concessions that Russia is maybe willing to make for the President Trump and his position over Ukraine. Because you see, if this meeting is very important for both sides, but presidents would never meet if there's something being discussed, and that we can might see something coming out of this meeting.
Well, absolutely. And what interest, really, given that Vladimir Putin sees himself as perhaps winning on the ground for the time being militarily, what incentive is there for him to actually de-escalate and call a ceasefire?
Well, as you know, remember President Clinton has said to President George Bush, who was George Bush Sr., a war president, when he was winning the war in Kuwait. Of course, I'm not comparing those two wars, but in the same time, President Clinton, who was running against him, said it's economy stupid. Yeah. President Putin is not much into focusing on economy, but his finance minister, Siluanov, and other people, and even defense minister Belousov, who used to be the economic minister and who was in charge of economy. And so they all know what's actually happening in the economy, and the economy is not strong. So now, yes, we can sustain this war, people could say, people who are in charge for the economic base, but they could say, let's say in a year, what's going to be in a year, we don't know. So this is actually gives Mr. Putin sort of a room for maneuver in sort of like trying to, well, get away from this conflict with his whatever he already achieved.
Now, Donald Trump comes into a lot of criticism for his naivety when it comes to foreign affairs at times. But could you also argue at the same time that by having a meeting such as this, the optics of the Russian president and the US president meeting together gives the Russian leader that much more face and therefore perhaps gives him a bigger stake?
Really, Logan? That is crazy. Yeah, Lanzu, I mean, I would say that nobody's really winning the war. Russia's been making some small advancements lately, but it's come at the expense of their economy. I mean, they're relying on North Koreans now. That's crazy. So I don't know. Maybe that is the other angle, is that maybe Putin, I don't know, does he care about the economy? I know he cares in a sense of, you know, making Russia a great country, so to speak, but does he care if it's between get a better economy, maybe, and some, you know, deals with the United States, or get those 4 regions he's after? If he had to pick between the two, I feel like Putin, he would pick those 4 regions he's after, right? Because does Putin really care if the average Russian maybe doesn't have as much food on the table? I think he probably cares about as much as the average Ukrainian cares that the Russians maybe have had to give up a few things. You know, they probably don't care at all. And I don't think Putin really does either. Here's the old dog and pony show, so to speak. Sorry I'm late. Hey, Sewell, you're never late, my friend. I appreciate you, dude. Thank you, Sewell. But yeah, that's crazy, Logan. So Rubio is the Secretary of State, the acting National Security Advisor, the acting USA Administrator, which doesn't really exist anymore anyways. So, and then the active US Archivist, NARA. I don't even know what that is. Dealing with archives? Let's see what that is. National Archives. Okay. That's weird. So why he's the executive of that agency, huh? Well, earn that paycheck, Marco. Oh man. Yeah, that's a lot of positions for one guy, especially when they're Some of those, I mean, Secretary of State, that's a solo position in itself. National Security Advisor, that's a standalone position, right? Yeah, that's why Wyckoff said ask Rubio. Yeah, Rubio knows everything because he's got half the roles in the government. Yeah, what an ambitious guy. I think it's very obvious that Rubio is going to be the next, probably the next Republican nominee after Trump finishes this term. At least he's positioned to be. I don't know what Republican right now would overtake him. He doesn't seem to be as hated in the press as a lot of Trump people. So if he can survive the Trump administration without tarnishing his name in one of those 4 jobs, maybe Marco Rubio could end up winning the nomination. But also, I think once Trump's over with, this term's over with, I think people will be quickly distancing themselves, or whatever's most advantageous politically for them, as people often do. Yeah, if he cared about the economy, then he wouldn't have started the war. Yeah, that's a good point, Leia, too. I mean, wars are good for the defense industry, of course, but the rest of the economy, not so much. So I'm sure the, Russian defense contractors, which are more or less owned by the Russian government, they're essentially just arms of extensions of the Russian government. But yeah, they're all doing great. Now the rest of the economy, your mom and pop convenience stores and restaurants and stuff in Russia are probably not doing too well because a lot of their resources are being allocated for this war. And the thing is, among the Russian population, you got to assume with as many soldiers as they've lost that there's a growing anti-war sentiment, because when you lose a lot of soldiers, the thing is those soldiers all have families. So if Russia's really lost close to 1 million men, like a lot of the figures put them at, I mean, that's 1 million families. That's a lot of wounded and messed up people that the Russian government, are they going to care for those soldiers? I wouldn't expect them to. I mean, we see how well the United States government cares for our own soldiers here after they get out. So, yeah. The economy's not doing well in Russia, and they've been sanctioned pretty much by all of the world except for, India's still buying stuff due to proximity and ease, I think. China, obviously, proximity, and their allies. But I think Trump will go quietly after the second term. Ask yourself why he's trying to deploy National Guard everywhere and take control of D.C. Putin is Trump's role model. He wants the same kind of. Yeah, you might be right. There's been times where he's hinted that a third term could be a possibility. Now, it would take overturning of the U.S. Constitution to actually pull it off without there being extensive backlash. And even if they did make an amendment to the Constitution, which I think 2/3 of the states have to ratify it, if I remember correctly. But even if somehow he made that happen, a lot of people would not be happy. I mean, people were very unhappy the first time, very unhappy the second time. If laws are changed so a third time can happen, you can only imagine that a lot of people in America would really start to lose it at that point. Don't understand why Zelensky refused to go to Alaska, but went all over God's creation to get work money. I don't think Zelensky wasn't invited to Alaska. He was specifically left out. Let me double check that. Was Zelensky invited to Alaska? Let's check that out here. What do pump trips? What do they want? Meeting underway. Sideline Ukrainians. Putin gets a red Let's see. So the LA Times is saying Ukrainian President Zelensky was not invited, left uninvited, according to the BBC. Here, even Fox News says Zelensky was not invited. So he was not included in this. And a lot of Ukrainians are not happy about this, which is reasonable to expect. Like, imagine your country's been invaded. Like I've said multiple times, biggest conflict since World War II, pretty much on the world stage at this point. I don't know if there's been a mass scale war bigger than this. There's been wars that kind of dragged on for a long time that a lot of people died in kind of because of humanitarian reasons, like, in Sudan and some of the civil wars and like in Darfur and stuff. I think maybe more people died overall, but in terms of like large scale fighting, incessant fighting, bombings, artilleries, missile, airplanes, and everything. There you go. There's a flyover in Anchorage. Hey, Bubba Gump, how you doing, my friend? But let's see. But the thing that Russians are upset about, their people dying at war, yeah. But everyone is okay with occupation politics because it's all Putin's war. But we like that Russia becomes bigger. Yeah, right. So what Leia 2 is basically saying is the Russian viewpoint. They don't like it that the economy's maybe suffering or that soldiers are dying, but also they do like the idea of expanding their country. And I think there is a lot of entitlement amongst the Russian people and just Russian history to these regions in Ukraine. They feel like a lot of Russians feel like it's not Ukraine, those regions. It's actually Russia, and that this war is just them taking back what's rightfully theirs. There's a lot of people, millions of people in Russia who do think that way. So that's something that when a whole country, or maybe not a whole country, but a good portion of a country has their mind made up about something like that, it's hard to combat that. Just like building Gary's. Waiting to pay attention to red flags until after the takeover. Yeah, sound the alarm. Hey, we need defense. And then you look at the map and there's nowhere to spawn. Yeah, exactly. So we're still getting a lot of speculation right now on what's going to happen here. Let's go back to
why? Because so far Putin didn't
regular X here. We'll see.
Figures who have made a lot for this. Senator Graham has
still talking. Okay, there's a couple more people getting gathered in this conference room. Maybe we're not too terribly far off from it. Pro-Ukrainian protesters gather.
From Trump administration.
Let's see if Sky News has learned anything since we last ditched them.
This, of course, the
earlier they were talking about how they didn't talk to the press, and it was released ahead of time that Putin and Trump were going to have their conversation, and then they would do a press conference after. So Sky News just wasn't in the know there. It seems. There was a guy from Kharkiv there. At least he was in Kharkiv, and that was that
I'm sure that
Al Jazeera? Yeah, there we go.
Putin
Let's see what he has to say.
Agree finally to the ceasefire. But there's a big question, because before Trump said several times that he set several deadlines, and he said that if Russia do not stop shooting, killing of Ukrainians, if there is no ceasefire, then Trump will impose new sanctions. It was said several times, there were several deadlines, but nothing happened.
Professor,
that's why it's a big question what will come out of this meeting.
Professor, what
absolutely
do you want to
right.
see come out of this meeting as a Ukrainian?
Well, as a Ukrainian, I think it's important to have real ceasefire, And after that, we can talk, we can have negotiations and to see how we will move forward. Because now, when Russia continues bombardment of the whole Ukraine, and look, by the way, today regional center Sumy was mentioned. Today I was in Sumy, and it's 30 kilometers from the Russian border. And yes, the central market was hit by Russia. The central market, imagine, military object. So we can't conduct negotiations in this situation when Russia continues, to kill Ukrainians. And by the way, several days ago in state-controlled Russian information agencies, there was an article that all the Ukrainians should be exterminated. Can you believe that? There was a title of this article. All the Ukrainians should be exterminated. So that's why we hope for pressure on Putin to move to real negotiations, because so far it was just the imitation, nothing like that. And definitely we would like to restore the territorial integrity of our country.
Yes, Professor.
We think that.
All right, so that's a professor in Kharkiv. So, yeah, whew. Man, that's tough. Yeah, hinting at ignoring the Constitution should be cause for removal. Yeah, it's really wild to even throw around the idea of a third term because it's, the United States Constitution didn't start with term limits for presidents. It became a thing later on because we saw that it could potentially really put you in a bad situation if you have someone who's, on third, fourth, fifth term. They're really old. It came after Roosevelt died in office during World War II. He had just started his fourth term, and then the United States, lost their president. He just died before the war was over. And so, of course, Truman came in shortly after that and then dropped atomic bombs shortly after that. And, the war ended, but also it's still hot contention over whether or not those bombs should have ever been dropped. Yeah, thank God it's Friday. Oh, hey, Logan, have fun. No, I'm not playing any more PTE. I played it earlier. The server's dead. There's not going to be anyone to play it with. Unfortunately. Tis what tis. Let's see what else he has to say.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories. The presidents of Russia and the United States are in Alaska for a high-stakes meeting aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been excluded from the talks and has warned anything agreed in his absence will be meaningless. Donald Trump is joined at the talks by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. A one-on-one meeting had initially been planned. The Russian leader's delegation includes Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Putin's advisor on foreign relations, Yuri Ushakov. Well, as all of this is going on in Anchorage, who better to talk to than our diplomatic editor, James Bays. James, stakes are high here. How high are they? And again, got to ask you this question. Do we know anything more? And how do we measure success?
We don't know anything more, and you're right, stakes are extremely high, a very, very important meeting. I think perhaps it's worth just taking a step back and looking at this summit and where we are, because when this was first announced more than a week ago that there was going to be this summit between the two leaders, I don't think anyone was predicting that it was going to take place on US soil. Yes, Alaska is a place that's very close to both sides, but it's US territory. And then when they said Alaska, I don't think anyone predicted that it would be on a US military base. There were all sorts of suggestions where it could be in Alaska. And the reason for that is the Russians are very, very proud and have insisted in the past on neutrality whenever they have diplomacy. I can remember just a few years ago that there were talks on Syria with the old Syrian Assad regime, and Russia objected to them being in Geneva because they said Geneva wasn't a neutral location. I think that tells you something. I think it tells you how much Vladimir Putin wanted these talks and how much he wanted to be recognized as one of the top leaders in the world, sitting down with the most powerful man in the world, and how much I think he perhaps thinks that by doing that, he can get Donald Trump on his side. He remembers his previous meetings. He remembers that they've had very warm, cordial relations. And I think he thinks that this can be a diplomatic triumph if he was to meet face to face, and shows that he really wanted.
So, interesting take there. He's basically saying Putin looks at this as an opportunity to be talking to the president of the United States, and that's going to make him look powerful, and maybe he can get Trump on his side now in terms of what some of the negotiations are going to be to end the war. That's one theory for sure. I think also part of it is just he knows he's wanted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court. So I think him going to America is like a, oh yeah, well look what I can do anyways type deal. I mean, it's Putin we're talking about here. You know what I mean? Dinner time? Awesome, see Will. At least there won't be any discussions about exchange of Ukrainian territories for you. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is they can't even, they could talk about that for hours if they want, but Zelensky already said up front he's not going to agree to anything that these two agree to now. So this isn't meant to be an actual negotiation or something that's going to give us some concrete terms of what's going to happen in the future. It's more meant, I think, to start the dialogue. You know, I think Trump maybe understands that Putin is going to feel a lot of, you know, pride in himself stepping foot into America, and maybe he can use that to his advantage somehow. You know, Trump, he sits and he plots and he schemes these things. So it would be so interesting to hear the inner thoughts of both of these two and to really know exactly what's going on in their heads, because they're both going to say one thing and do another. For the most part, tends to be the results you get here. With Putin, he's predictably untrustworthy, and with Trump, he's predictably unpredictable. Do you remember that interview with Putin by some guy and how Putin was talking about alternative history for hours? I don't, but I'm sure Putin has a long explanation for, you know, why the USSR wasn't a bad country and why Russia is entitled to Chechnya and the Crimea and you know, Zaporizhia and all those. Like, oh, you find it nice? That would be great. Yeah, no problem. I'd love to see it. Yeah, seems like maybe we're getting tiny little bit closer here. I don't know. There's definitely more people hanging out in the press room. All right, more scenes from Gaza. Sad scenes from Gaza. We'll talk about Gaza next week.
The White House is answering this criticism of Trump's lightweight team, and the Russians have the more experienced foreign affairs team. The White House is saying, look, he's a unique negotiator, he's a unique deal maker, he does things instinctively, and that could all unsettle the Russians. What do you make of that?
Well, the White House is telling the truth, that he is a unique person. He does operate by instinct rather than knowledge and briefings and specifics. He's reading the people. He is getting his own gut interest, his own gut feeling about something. But I don't think that's going to rattle the Russians at all. I think it's something that Vladimir Putin.
Now I remember he did the Tucker Carlson interview, but I never watched
certainly
it.
He has more depth of knowledge.
When was this? Just a year ago?
He has more patience. He's willing to escalate. So I think Putin is always looking at how
Posted
he can gain
by the
Trump.
Kremlin.
Just think about the last 2 weeks. Trump had set a 50-day deadline for ceasefire.
So
Then he changed.
basically, he's one of those "I'm just misunderstood" guys. Kind of like how, quoting, but Hitler was just misunderstood, or Mussolini was just misunderstood. Yeah, exactly. Interview with Tucker Carlson. Yeah, exactly. That's what these dictators do, is they manipulate. They try to present alternate solutions and alternate theories to try and get people to join their cause. It's very standard MO. That's why, Putin every bit is, just a ruthless dictator. Absolutely. Absolutely. And he plays the role very well. I just, amidst all this and just, being an American, listening to it and hearing some things and not being happy about, what my government's saying, but hearing this, well, Ukraine kind of started it theory, I'm not a big fan of hearing that, to be honest with you, from my government. It was very obvious what was happening as it was happening when the invasion started. So for the United States government to latch on to some of these, well, we're actually the victims theories, it's very sad to hear.
Well, I don't think he actually does that. I know he says he would do that because he thinks that sounds like a good threat. But I don't think he actually does that because it would make him look like a failure. And he will never accept not being able to do something. He wants to be seen as the only guy that could really do this and worthy of that Nobel Peace Prize that he covets.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen.
So
they're probably
how
doing
then,
it right now as we speak.
Just a minute left, Kurt. How then does Trump bring Putin to a position where he agrees to at least some sort of ceasefire?
Yeah, I think the driver is going to be how many lives are lost on the battlefield, which the Ukrainians are taking care of, and how hard it is to sustain Russia's state budget. Right now, they're digging deep into their existing reserves, their state fund reserves. They can run out of those by the end of the year if oil prices stay low and if it is more and more difficult for them to sell their oil and gas in world markets. Ideally, the US and Europe would help accelerate that process by slapping on secondary sanctions and really tightening sanctions implementation. Not clear that Trump is going to do that, so this may take a longer period of time. But it's ultimately that economic pressure, I think, that can get to Putin and say, okay, he's risking the state now, he better stop and take a ceasefire for a while.
Kurt Volker, appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Let's go straight to our US correspondent, James Matthews, who is at the airbase with the American delegation for us. And, well, James, you heard Kurt Volker there. Now, he knows a thing or two about these things, and he is saying no dramatic breakthrough here. This is part of a series of meetings, part of a process that could go on for some time. And I asked him, how long does Donald Trump go along with this? And he says, well, he has to, because otherwise it would seem to be failure. It's an interesting point.
Yeah, secondary sanction deadline was last Friday. And then, of course, nothing happened. It was basically nothing happened, and then they announced that they were going to do this instead. Which is, I don't know. That to me, that makes Trump look a little weak. He said, oh, they better be done by August 8th. And then a week later, he invites Putin. That's why, Trump is predictably unpredictable. you know that you're not going to know what he's going to do next.
Economic pressure and the hard message that Donald Trump gives to Vladimir Putin about how he will suffer if he doesn't shift. You know, the extent to which this is a meeting where Trump can put pressure on Vladimir Putin and can force him to change, to shift in his position. So far, we have had generalities from Donald Trump. On the one hand, talking tough, on the other, talking about land swaps and everything that Putin wants and Ukraine does not. This is the time, and this is the test of the power that Donald Trump can bring to bear over Vladimir Putin. You know, is that economic pressure? Is it a threat? Is it a physical threat, a military threat? I mean, that's unlikely. That would seem too extreme at this stage. But yeah, the economic pressure, sanctions, more direct sanctions, an increase in secondary sanctions, which would resonate, of course, with what European countries are saying. They're saying that if Trump comes back here without a ceasefire today, then they will increase sanctions. That's the hard, tough message that Europe wants delivered to Vladimir Putin. The question is, can Donald Trump deliver? Is it in his interests? Does he see it as in his interests? Or is he actually focused on the bigger picture, the wider agenda that they will address as this meeting goes on, financial opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, way too. You know, all these stories, how USA was world police and now we're inviting dictators over to the States. But I don't know, you know, we'll see if this is the beginning of the end of the war. I don't know. I'm not optimistic, but at the same time, like, he was just mentioning, here's a great thing. He was mentioning how if, you know, this meeting doesn't result in ceasefire, that other European nations are going to step up their sanctions. Like, what are other European nations waiting for? This has been going on for 3.5 years. And they're not fully sanctioned against Russia? Like, I don't get it. Like, why has it come down to this? You know what I mean? Because ultimately, from a security standpoint, this is much more important to Europe than it is to the United States. So why is Europe waiting to see what the United States can make happen before they increase their sanctions? Yeah, you have no expectations. Exactly. Now, Melania gets to meet him too. That's nice.
Start talking about strategic arms limitation, maybe announcing talks beginning on the successor to New START very soon, talk about economic deals, talk about the U.S.-Russia bilateral relationship, fend off the sanctions, and keep things going in Ukraine.
Right. Do you think that Trump should have granted this meeting to Putin without getting anything in return? Certainly not a ceasefire.
No, that's not. My view is that this is a big mistake. This takes Putin out of international PERDA, where he's been since he invaded Ukraine in 2022. Even to get into Alaska, we had to waive sanctions against the Russians that were imposed after that invasion. And as you say, Putin paid nothing for it. Trump is tariffing the whole world for the privilege of doing business in America. But to get Vladimir to Anchorage, it didn't cost anything, and Putin will take full advantage of it. Look, I think the ceasefire for Ukraine itself is a mistake, though, because once the ceasefire lines are drawn, there's every risk that negotiations will be protracted, and that ceasefire line will be the new border between Ukraine and Russia until Putin repairs and rebuilds his army when he invades for the third time.
So what you're saying, the ceasefire itself is not a mistake. You're saying the freezing the front lines during a ceasefire, you think that's a mistake. You think they should be forced to pull back, do you?
No, well, if we had applied adequate force, if U.S. and U.K. and NATO for the last 3.5 years had had a strategy to win for Ukraine, as opposed simply to a strategy of making sure they didn't lose, we'd be in a different place now. But the fact is, I've wondered for some time why Putin doesn't want his own ceasefire to repair the damage that's being done, to get the sanctions lifted, to get his economy back on track again. And that may be his plan B. I mean, there are various ways for Putin to come out of this successfully today. We'll see what the end result is, of course.
And when we do see what the end result is, whatever it is, do you think that Vladimir Putin will come back for more in the future?
Absolutely. He told us in 2005 at his address to the State Duma. He's told us several times since then. He's trying to recreate the Russian Empire. And I think for those who have that point of view in Russia, and there are quite a few of them, you don't have a Russian Empire without Ukraine. So he achieved the success in getting 10% of Ukraine in 2014. He's up to 20% now.
So this is who's talking, John Bolton,
but he'll
former
come back for
ambassador
more.
to the UN.
That's why Zelensky wants security guarantees. And what I think many in Europe still don't understand, while Trump told them on Wednesday he's happy to talk about it, he's also said no NATO membership for Ukraine, no NATO security guarantees for Ukraine, and quite implicit in all that is no U.S. participation in security guarantees.
Well, that's interesting. And on that point, if there is some sort of land deal, do you think, well, I mean, what sort of security guarantees do you think Putin would accept? He doesn't seem to be, at the moment, willing to accept any.
Yeah, I don't think he wants any security guarantees. He doesn't want to allow Ukraine to become strong and rebuild its own capabilities while he's rebuilding his. Look, one thing that's absolutely central here, to whether it's NATO or NATO members, coalition of the willing, giving security guarantees to Ukraine, is the continued flow of American intelligence. Now, Trump hasn't said anything about that. That may be a good sign. He doesn't want to talk about it publicly. But even if the U.S. sold military equipment to Europeans who then in turn passed it on to Ukraine, as is the case with the Patriot air defense batteries, without the intelligence we've been supplying, I think Ukraine is in trouble. And there's no indication Trump is willing to keep that going.
And we've got about a minute left. Just I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the way this summit ends, what emerges from this summit.
Well, I think that anything they can announce as a deliverable that permits Trump not to reimpose the sanctions or add sanctions to the likes of China will buy time for Putin. So one deliverable that he sort of indicated yesterday, Putin did, how about an announcement that the two sides are going to begin immediate negotiations on the successor to the New START treaty? That's a real U.S.-Russia bilateral question. I don't think it would make sense, but it may help both of them find something they can say to declare this a success.
And that was John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor. And the talks are still going on, about 2.5 hours and counting now. And there is the suggestion.
So that was John Bolton, and he was UN ambassador's national security advisor. So he was basically saying, this could be playing into Putin's hand, like I kind of said earlier, by submitting to what Putin wants, which are those regions. They're basically paving the way for the third invasion of Ukraine in the future, which very much so. I mean, it's hard at this point, just seeing the history of the region, this being the second time Russian forces have invaded Ukraine. Why wouldn't that happen? It's really hard to not assume that might happen. Just basic Ukrainian needs. Yeah. It was very open territory there. They're on a military base in Alaska. I was actually born there, believe it or not, but Elmendorf Air Force Base. Let's see where these guys are. So yeah, kind of in the middle of Alaska, but really close to Russia. I mean, only a couple 100 miles from this. Now, of course, from Moscow, which is way over here, yeah, that's still a pretty long flight, but it's also a long flight from DC. So probably maybe is about the halfway point for both these guys. Maybe a little further for Putin. Just looking at it, yeah. All right, let's see. Oh, I already got lots of quality content on X about this. Oh, Trump's drifting on the carpet. Call the authorities. All right, there's usually nothing good on X. X is terrible. I don't like any content on X for the most part.
To the police, because the police with the assist.
Now there's more protesters gathering, it seems like. Playing some traditional Ukrainian music. It's a pretty good amount of people. They got a big, giant Ukrainian flag there. And this is presumably on Elmendorf Air Force Base, although it might be just outside the gates. It's possible all these people are just civilians and that they're not actually on the base. It would make sense if they're like right outside the gate or something. Because usually you're not going to get military families that do protests and stuff like that. Tend to stay out of it. Oh, this is your anthem. Okay. My apologies. My apologies. It's really sad. You know, it's Ukraine's just really getting the short end of the stick, which is a English saying. Basically, you're getting screwed over. Because I think there's a certain degree of this where Europe, NATO, United States, the West as a whole is pretty happy with just bleeding out Russia's economy and their military power. I mean, Russia's lost so many vehicles. They got guys on frickin' scooters, you know, driving across fields, trying to get to the front at this point. So I think, unfortunately, it seems like the world is more or less using Ukraine to just bleed out the Russians, which is really sad. They're still unfurling.
Walk back.
It's a really big flag.
Folks, do we want to take 2 steps back to get to the end of it? Everybody here.
Here's another shot of the same event.
Contribute however you do. So a big hug from Olga, Dr. Olga Schwab, who some of you met when we had an event at the Captain Cook, and a big hug from her and the people on the front lines. Thank you.
Peace to Ukraine. The leaders landed in their respective planes at the Elmendorf-Richardson military base around 30 minutes apart. The US president was the first down the steps, and then he made his way onto the red carpet, connecting from each plane and meeting.
Yeah, it's a massive flag.
To greet his opposite number. President Trump applauded the Russian president and greeted him like an old friend as he made his way across for a handshake, face to face, 6 years after their last meeting. The meeting here in Anchorage was organized just days ago, but the world's press was there to see
there's going to be a
how the two
lot of
men, as they
people
followed
in America who like that little, like just being a little too cordial with this man here. Actual dictator. That's Trump saying these are the planes we're going to bomb you with if you don't listen. Oh, man.
it together.
President Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
Mr. President, what's your message to Vladimir Putin?
Mr. Putin, did you underestimate Ukraine? President Putin, will you stop killing civilians?
Reporters shouted questions as the men stood on top of a podium and posed for photos in Anchorage, with one journalist, as you heard there, asking the Russian president if he will stop the killing of civilians. The two presidents then made their way towards Mr. Trump's presidential limo. Despite Vladimir Putin's Aurus limousine sitting on the tarmac, the Russian president seemed to enjoy his ride in the Cadillac nicknamed the Beast. Mr. Trump waved to the crowds as the car departed, while President Putin was seen smiling.
Press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
Thank you, press.
Mr. Putin, will you commit to not killing any more civilians?
And yet more difficult questions, though Putin appeared to be in good spirits, cupping his hands as if he wanted to give an answer.
He pretends to not know English. He speaks English.
With the American delegation. And
all right. I think I'm going to call it there, though. This could go on for hours before we finally get to see these guys talk. So thank you for everyone for hanging out today. You know, they're going to have a press conference sometime tonight. It might be in another 3 or 4 hours. So I will definitely be back Monday, and we'll kind of dig into some highlights from the press conference, see if we can figure out what these two guys talked about, what might be the next step here. Obviously, they're going to have to include Zelensky at some point in these talks. You know, you can only make so many negotiations. Yeah, Laity, thanks for hanging. And I hope things work out. You know, it's really sad what's been going on in Ukraine for the last 3.5 years now. Nobody deserves to have to deal with that stuff. So hopefully this comes to an end soon, but we will keep covering this Russia-Ukraine war. Hopefully it's over soon. But other than that, yeah, no problem. I will be back Monday. We'll talk about this. I'm sure there'll be an update on Hamas and Gaza and all that good stuff. So we will talk about that as well. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you.